our meeting. I'm going to open the meeting, and I am going to call roll. Brad Grout. Allison Castillo.
Present.
Mario Perez.
Here.
Phoenix Askovich.
Here.
Rose Burke.
Present.
And Brandy Heindel. Okay, and next we will open up the citizen comment period. And up first is Lila Knight.
My name is Lila Knight, and although I did make prepared comments tonight, I can't make them, and I apologize. I have a really horrible public meeting tomorrow in San Marcos, and I took out my anger on you instead of that meeting, and that is rude and unacceptable. So I'm just going to talk off my head and tell you that I know you have a very difficult job ahead of you, and whatever you decide and recommend to City Council, it's the City Council's decision. And, you know, the public is probably going to scapegoat you. But I will say, I will be there to remind them that you were appointed and you agreed to serve. And I do appreciate that so very much. The only other thing I would say is that public service, which is what y'all are doing, really comes from the heart. It comes from the need to give back to your community. And it really doesn't require compensation. If someone is running for office for compensation, then they're probably running for the wrong reason. But I wish you all the best of luck. And you have like no time at all to do this, which is totally unfair. But I didn't have anything to do with that decision. So, but good luck.
Okay. Thank you. Next up is Diane Herval.
My name is Diane Herval. I live at 1528 Amberwood Loop in Kyle. Thank you for allowing me to speak. As time goes on, I feel like our council is upside down. I feel like they're micromanaging instead of being the executive branch of our local government. I feel like our council is at City Hall in meetings more than the staff that were hired to handle those tasks. Because of this, I feel entitlements have set in, and many members of our current council feel they are putting in an enormous amount of time and incurring expenses. I get it. I've actually been in their shoes. I served for 6 years. However, they should be relying on staff more, is my opinion. In the charter, it states the council will receive a stipend, not a salary. Stipends can be used to reimburse yourself for expenses. Please take note. I would like to take a minute to speak to reimbursable expenses and the credit card policies. I think that's on your agenda. Unless you are recommending a cost center accounting approach, you will provide a carte blanche to council to utilize the credit card and submit a reimbursable expense with no documentation. No council member should be filling up their tank. They should be doing mileage reimbursements and tagging A, the cost center attached to them, and B, the cost center attached to the potential developer and/or project. All receipts must be supplied or you don't get paid. All charges should be entered into a database with a description for all of council to view, so many members who are left out of meetings might be able to capture what was discussed. No member of the council should submit an expense without justification, receipt, and cost centers. Their peers, as it states in the charter, shall govern them. This will also provide transparency not only to the rest of council, but to their constituents. Any confidential information should be redacted for the public, but not for council. Staff should be doing the same. The credit cards provided are being abused. I mean, it's come up in meetings one after the other. Policies and procedures need to be established. No council member should be allowed to charge $15,000 and get away without providing receipts. Shame on them. You guys are tasked with basically a cleanup job, not to mention you don't have much time to do it in. I hope you are really able to think it all the way through and get it right. And I hope them not giving you much time wasn't done by design. Lastly, it's no secret the mayor has a consulting and real estate company in addition to his mayoral duties for the city of Kyle. I hope the taxpayers of Kyle are not paying to reimburse him for expenses related to his projects. Please make certain there is clean and concise method of documenting the credit cards as well as any deemed reimbursable expenses, should you choose. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Seeing none, I will close citizen comments. The next item on the agenda is to select a chair and a vice chair. So I will open the floor for accepting nominations for a chair.
Rose Burke for her chair.
Okay. Okay, so we have a motion by Brad for Rose to be the chair, and then the second by Phoenix. All in favor? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. All right, so Rose will be our chair. And now that you are the chair, I will turn it over to you to open it up for nominations for vice chair.
I nominate Phoenix for vice chair.
I second. No. Aye.
Perfect. Who was the second? Brad. Okay, thank you. Okay, all right, that passed. So now it's up to you to bring forward the next item, which is the discussion and possible action related to council compensation.
We're now open up for discussion for comments regarding
Council compensation
council
recommendations.
compensation. So we're here to discuss the current compensation for the council, which is what, $1,000 a month? Is that right?
I don't even know. I think it's 1,500, wasn't it?
Yeah, I thought it was about 11,000 a year. I don't know if that translates to.
Do we have a current
Is there any
copy?
material for us?
Yeah. it is.
So
I looked in the packet and I didn't
I didn't either. I didn't see
see
anything.
anything on
So
this.
what it currently is $1,000 per month for the city council members, and then $1,300 for the mayor.
Okay.
And that was just revised within the last year and a half or something? Wasn't it 500 prior to that?
It was recent, I don't know how recent,
Yeah.
2 years ago, something of that nature, right?
3 years ago.
3 years ago, yeah.
So can I be recognized, Chair?
Yes, Brad, I recognize Brad.
I would like to know, can city staff supply the current credit card policies for the city staff at this point? And a listing of council members that have a credit card. My understanding is not all of them have credit cards, but that's anecdotal from watching council. And also someone from, I don't know, the director of finance or someone from the finance department that can walk us through the reimbursement processes that we currently have for city staff. I think those would be very good guidelines for as we look at this. Given I don't think there's anybody from finance here, and I don't want to put you on the spot right now asking those questions, could we ask that they be present at the next meeting to go through those things with the chairs?
Yes.
As I understand, we're supposed to be looking at the compensation and the credit card reimbursement / expense policy and proposing something, and I'll yield the floor.
I agree with Brad. I thought it was interesting that our guest speaker brought up that at times there are council members who may manipulate whatever policy is in place. So I think if we were given that policy to review and discuss, it'd be a lot easier to decide what we'd like them to be compensated for and how.
Does anyone else have a comment? To be honest, I thought we were going to have some kind of packet when I got here. Not to look like I don't know what I'm doing, but I looked at the packet, and the packet I received was just an agenda. Is that what you all had? Okay. So my understanding was we were going to be given a list of a recommendation perhaps that the finance director had put together of what he thought the allowable expenses were. I do.
I believe that was my understanding too, that essentially we were supposed to look at the compensation as a whole. And I'm going off of what I saw in the council meeting, not discussing it with anybody further than that, which I think is totally appropriate, because I'd like to look at this with, and I realize we have a very short time frame, but I want to give it a very systematic and holistic look at, what is acceptable here. I will potentially offer to reach out to the city of San Marcos and see if they have a city council reimbursement and credit card policy. I'm familiar with a couple other organizations, quasi-governmental, that have policies. So potentially I could grab those too and bring those and provide through staff that documentation.
Well, it seems to me like, at the very least, these are two separate subjects that we could separate for now, right? And have, because the credit card one, I'm not, to be honest with you, I'm not very familiar with the situation. I heard about it earlier today, and then I heard the speech earlier, the discussion just now, and that's about the most I know about the credit card policy. And as such, I would like more information as well before I could make any form of decisions or recommendations in that. But as it relates to the pay, which of course was brought up by our first speaker, as well as the fact that it's just been raised 3 years ago, it's easy enough to at least have a framework around that part of the discussion without any form of documentation, right? I think that we could at the very least cover that, right? So I know that this is one of those subjects that some people say it's citizen government, we should be doing this because we want to, it's voluntarily and the like, so which I don't know how I feel in that regard. I feel a little bit conflicted because I do understand that this is a citizen government, and without those of us like myself, who's willing to come here tonight, free, because I care about the city and because I'm interested in making sure that we're on the right track in that regard. If we don't have volunteers, of course, that causes problems. But at the same time, would I want to run for city council? The answer to that is no, right? And the reason for that is because I think there's way too much work, way too much effort, way too much time that would need to be spent to be able to do that. So would I do it for free, or $2,000 or $1,000 in this case? No, not me, right? And so I wonder if we could possibly attract better candidates long-term if there was a compensation. So at the very least, that $1,000, that was appropriate, in my opinion, right? Should we go further from there? That's the discussion that's at hand, right? Is that appropriate, or is it not? Should we go further? I think that's the discussion that needs to be had at this particular moment with the limited documentation that we have, or at least that's how I view it.
I'm just gonna leave this open for everybody to
Okay.
speak and say what.
It was my understanding that we were going to be supplied with a draft on the policy on the credit card, and I was hoping that we would go through each section of the policy and get a better understanding of what our scope of work is going to be. I'm sitting here and we're pretty much trying to discuss what our goals is, but having some material to at least get started would be very beneficial to every one of us. And I wasn't certain that what we were going to be looking at, was it just the credit card policy, or is it also the compensation? So I wish we would have gotten a little better direction on our scope of work.
I think it's also important to note what our speaker said, especially coming from a former city councilwoman, that the compensation should only, if you look at it from this perspective, be what you've spent to be on city council. So nothing more than what you've spent. So I guess trying to figure out the difference between being compensated for your time, like you said, for your time, energy, or just being compensated for what you've spent on your time, for your time.
Are you suggesting then that you only being reimbursed, that there is no pay for it? Is that what you're saying? The $1,000 is only meant to reimburse your?
Discussing which we should do, yeah.
Got it.
Because there are two sides to it. So figuring out which one was best.
Right.
I view the $1,000 as a separate issue from what you get reimbursed for using your
Right.
credit card,
I
for being in
completely agree.
business and.
What should be an allowable expense is a completely separate
Right.
discussion than what we should be paid for. I think that conflating the two is a dangerous situation.
However, where I see there's a little overlap where you say, okay, what's the $1,000 for? Well, okay, time and effort, we understand that. And, initially when I'd heard that the amount was increased, I was like, wow, that is a significant increase. What was that all about? But I will say that since I've gotten to know city council members better, and I see the effort they put in, and I hear how late the meetings run, I mean, they are leaving
I've watched.
past midnight. So I, personally, just from that perspective, time and effort, I think $1,000, just looking at that to me is not unreasonable to me again. And I also think, okay, if you want to think about things like, okay, so some people think they want to present a better image, they want to dress up a little bit, maybe they want to wear a suit or something, they would have some dry cleaning in that. Well, normally under regular business expenses, anything like that, that is on you. How you choose to dress, wear, whatever, that is your own expense. That is not a business expense. However, I could see where if you were given $1,000, you might take that into consideration. That includes me covering that kind of thing, where if I want to get my nails done, if I want to get my hair done,
Yeah,
if
but
I want to, I want to provide a more professional image. Maybe if you have that money, you would feel like maybe, if you choose to do that, that's where you get that from.
Yeah, but that's, and I know you're not proposing that that's accurate, you're just making statements
Right.
toward this $1,000. So I'm not meaning to impugn you
No.
in that statement. But the idea of paying somebody a stipend that is okay, that we could do our nails with and the likes of which, to me, that doesn't seem right. TV personalities have to get paid for their looks and appearance, but that's because it's their professional job, right? So the idea of allowing expenses, but again, this is why the expense versus the pay is a completely separate subject to me. So I feel completely different on the expenses than I do what's allowable versus what's not
I
allowable.
guess I wasn't saying that that's what it's for.
No,
What
I know
I'm
you weren't.
saying
You were
is,
implying, yeah.
I'm saying that $1,000 should cover those kind
Oh,
of things.
I got it. I
you
got it.
know, if that's what you choose to
I got
do.
it. That
And
makes
that's
sense.
why,
Yeah. No,
you
no.
know,
That is, so this $1,000 you do with what you want to.
Right,
There's no
right,
need
right,
to.
right.
I got it. That makes more sense. Yeah.
because I know there will be people that will say, well, I have to have this image, da-da-da, and I'm saying, that I think the $1,000, that's part
That's
of
what this
that,
is.
that's part of that, your time and energy, and it's also anything else that you
I agree
feel
with
you
that.
need to be presentable.
Yeah, I agree with that. Thanks for clarifying.
Brad?
So looking at what we've all made some really good comments, I think. Looking at those comments, do we feel we've asked, and maybe we could ask that it be repeated what we've asked for, because at this point I've kind of lost track. Do we feel as a group that we have asked for the appropriate information from the city to have those discussions? And I totally agree with y'all in segmenting it into
That's separate conversation.
separate conversations. They're obviously related, but they're also points which have been brought up and were brought up in the general direction we were given. So perhaps this meeting is get us organized for having the information to have those debates. Because I know for one, I would like to see, I kind of keep obsessing on the credit card policy because in working in a professional environment for years, I've always had that policy to sit there and go, can I do this or can I not do this? What,
Right.
and trust me, having done business travel over the years, there's a certain amount of expenses you just kind of take on, like.
Right, and I was gonna say, but I've been in a professional arena for many years as well. I work for Dell. I don't currently, but I used to until recently. And I did lots of traveling for them in companies prior. And I know where you're pushing the lines, I know where you're not, and I know how to make sure that I don't push the lines. right?
Exactly.
I know how to make it very transparent. I know what's allowable because there's a document that says what's allowable, right? So the statement, what is allowed, is clearly stated. There shouldn't be ambiguities on this to me. It's a little surprising that there is, right? So, but that said, it is part of the things we need to discuss, which is why I say, let's keep that as a separate conversation, and discuss that when we have better information. I agree with your point to that.
I do have a printout here, believe it was available at one of the other meetings of what the suggestion maybe of what the policy might be. I thought that was gonna be in our materials. As far as I know, from people that I've talked to about the credit card policy, it's like a normal credit card policy. You sign it and you say, I will turn in receipts within, I believe it's 20 days, I believe, what this, if I'm not exact, but there is like, I will turn in receipts for all my expenses within 20 days, and if I don't, they're basically gonna be treated as personal, and I should be paying for them. And again, and then the rules are, just like the IRS rules are, who, what, when, where, why, what's the business reason? If you're going to meals, it should be who did you have the meals with? What was the business purpose? And it's not just the receipt, that's just the total, it's the detailed receipt.
Right.
And per what somebody said, and plus what I've heard is there have been a couple individuals that, I know of one for sure that has not been turning in receipts, and somehow it didn't get handled through the normal processes as far as being managed by the city, the people that should be overseeing that, so that was the concern. So there's also going to be something, I think, that we need to discuss on what we're going to do regarding that, because I believe there's an audit or something coming up internally of the expenses, correct?
Correct.
And
I believe you're absolutely true.
I know, speaking to other citizens, there's people that would like that money reimbursed.
Yeah, but that whole subject that you just brought up, though, I don't understand, maybe I'm just missing something, how we could even be in a situation where we don't know what should be expensed or not, right? So when I was using the business trip example, I knew not to buy alcohol. It just was one of those things. I could buy it, but I had to pay for it separately, and I couldn't turn it in on a receipt. and these things. I knew what my rules and boundaries were because they were clearly, and then as it relates to what type of receipt, how to pay for it, how to get the reimbursement, the timing of it, all of that's procedural. But what I'm expensing, I knew very clearly what that was. And is that not laid out here?
Well, I think.
Am I missing something in that regard?
I think, given what, and I keep coming back to anecdotal because I would really like to question the director of finance and get his input directly and not just, I watched this on TV on Kyle 10, because that's where I'm coming from. You know, I think the process for approvals was somewhat cloudy. And when we have that representative, that would be one of the questions I would ask is, what is the approval process for council? Is it a subcommittee of council that reviews all expenses on a regular basis so that council holds itself accountable? So the representatives on council do it, you know, is it the task of the city manager? Is it the task of the director of finance? Those are the things that appear to me to be cloudy, and I'd like to get the director of finance's input on directly, if available. So I think we have kind of, I almost want to call it a three-legged stool we're kind of going down. And I think we all kind of know what we want, but I also think we need to kind of define what information we want to see and how we can use that to fulfill the questions we're all kind of asking each other up here. Because I don't think the answers are necessarily going to appear up here. I think it's going to come from that input from the city staff, from citizens, because all are valid points. And I don't mean to be passing it along, but I think that's the best path forward is let's collect what we want to know from the city, from staff, ask for it. I'm guessing we're going to have another meeting, which I kind of expected that anyway.
And I'm so sorry to interrupt. Just to make sure you guys are all aware that the city council credit card charges and expense reimbursements, those are available on the city's website.
Okay.
If you haven't seen, they're under the city council page.
The policy?
The policy? That's
No,
what it is.
just the credit card charges for each member. And
Right, but
mayor
the
and
policies, I guess, would be
Right.
what needs
Something
to
that,
be.
right, that we
Yeah.
would need to get from
To
staff.
me,
Get
to me, if there is a debate about somebody who's turning in receipts that are putting in expenses without receipts and the likes of which, those are subjects that need to be dealt with. But I think what really needs to be hammered out is how do we move forward so that that sort of thing doesn't happen again, right? You know,
Right.
I would think that would be the most important.
I think my impression I was given of why we were here was to have, you know, they were looking for a list of what's allowed, not allowed. To me, like you or anybody else that's been in business, to me, it's pretty black and white. You know, it's a business expense or it's not. I've never had any problem deciding.
But it was
what
defined,
is a business
though, right?
expense.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
And so I agree with whoever had mentioned that to you. It needs to be defined, and if that's our job,
And
I didn't realize that, but if that's our job, that needs to be our job.
And
right?
again, so I don't know, other than the policy itself that you sign when you get the credit card that says that you will do these things, as far as a list being accompanying that says these things are allowed, these aren't.
Well, so it sounds like at a certain line, the rails are there, the enforcement and this, when you get to a board, and I'm gonna use a board in a general term here, how they hold themselves accountable is, I think, some of the guidance that maybe this group should provide a recommendation on. Because, you know, back to, want to hear the director say it here instead of me remembering it, because my memory is not the best all the time. There was kind of a lack of clarity on who actually approves. You know, they can sign it and send it in, but someone has to be in charge of reviewing that, making sure it falls in policy, and then reporting to council if it doesn't follow policy.
For sure, I agree.
Because then that way, there's two people liable, the reviewer and the actual spender. The reviewer for actually, you know, making sure it meets policy. So no one's on an island unto themselves.
Again, I will stop saying this I never once wondered what I could turn in as an expense, not one single time. And I never once wondered how I was supposed to turn it in, because I knew I couldn't turn it in without a receipt, unless there were some guidelines as to the things you could, but it was minor dollars and not acceptable normally, right? I knew not to turn these things in. I knew not to turn these types of receipts in because it was well-defined. So the fact that we're even having this conversation feels to me like it's either not defined or it's not enforced, one of the two. And those two things need to be hammered out.
No, I totally agree. Could you read back, and I apologize, I saw you feverishly writing and I wasn't, what we've asked for at this point. And that way maybe we can, add to or subtract, like you brought up, the credit cards are on the site, which is great. I'll be in Excel heaven tonight.
Yeah.
Now, that was recent, right? Of the expenses of what they've been spending, that's a recent.
What's on the website?
Yeah.
Yes.
That's new. That was kind of as a result of all
I
of
could,
the past
and
meetings. They asked for more transparency. I mean, that's a little bit of peer pressure, so that's new.
well, I care about what has been spent, right? But to be honest with you, I think what matters most is how do we keep it from going awry before? The fact that there is so much angst around this conversation, the guardrails, as you put it, needs to be defined more clearly.
No, and I like the historical data, I'm a numbers
No,
person.
I'm not against it, I'm just saying that.
No, and, because is there a pattern that we need to consider of expenses that are reasonable that we see in those
Yeah.
charges?
So helping, if there, I guess the real question I'd wonder, maybe one of you guys know this, is there a list of what is acceptable or not right now?
I do know there is a credit, I'm sorry, Mario.
No, there isn't. As a former city employee, there was a process. You keep your receipts, and like you said, you knew what was valid, what you could charge, and what you could not. It was obvious. And when you were issued a credit card, you signed off that you agreed that you were going to follow that policy, meaning that you were going to take those receipts, you were going to make copies of them, provide them to the finance department, and you were supposed to mention what that meal was. I mean, who did you meet with? If you attended a conference, who was there and who also had a meal with you. You had to mention specifically the names of those individuals.
All normal stuff, yeah.
And what I'd like to also to propose is not just the receipt that you get at a restaurant, but the itemized receipt that includes
Whether
what
bought
you
alcohol-
exactly
whether you bought
ordered.
alcohol or not.
Thank,
Exactly.
yes.
Right, it's the detailed receipt.
We need to see that as
Summary,
well.
yep.
Yeah,
And if
yeah.
you submitted something that was incomplete, yeah, you would get a call from finance saying, hey, there's a component missing. And if you wanted finance to pay your bills, you had to go back and revise your submittal.
And the thing is, this is a city card, see, so.
So,
the
which
city
means
pays
the
for it, it's
responsibility.
already being paid for it, so, if somebody is already charged something, there has to be a way to get the money back from them if it's not a valid charge.
So I know we're calling for the policy, but is it our responsibility to kind of fix it, or I don't know the better word to use?
Well,
Like, is that
I
something
think
we can do?
we're gonna draft the guidelines, but then the council will have the final word.
Right.
Okay.
We recommend what the policy should be, or any
So-
changes to whatever policy currently exists.
So we should be incredibly intentional with the way we word.
Yeah, I'd
so
love
they
to see,
can't-
I would love to see how it is actually working
Yeah.
right now, so that we can be more clear, because, again,
And then like Brad said, maybe we can look at surrounding communities, for example, San Marcos, Buda, and see what their process is. And maybe they have a section in their ordinance that says, these are the do's and these are the don'ts that, apply when you use your credit card.
And we have, all they can say is no. This is like the third or fourth board I've served on with the city, and the number of things that I've sent up that they could say no to. If they don't like it, that's perfectly fine. And I think Lila mentioned that in her comments. We were appointed. It rests in them. So I think all ideas are great. I really do.
I agree.
So,
So it's our duty to kind of change the policy that we want to be implemented for the council, but the council can decide whether they want it to be.
I think ultimately what I'm hearing them saying is the council's the ones making the decision. They're just looking for input. They're just looking for input, is really what it boils down to, right? And so we are that input. That's what it sounds like. You know?
I will say, I really would be surprised if they don't agree with the majority of, I think they're
Yeah.
all, I think the current council is all looking, this is why this came up. They would like, some things to be enforced better. I also think, specifically, I remember being asked, like, why wasn't the credit card just pulled from the individual? And the response was, the finance director didn't feel like they had the authority to do that, so something's wrong. So, again, talking about enforcement or, you know, whatever, I know as a CPA and a controller in a company, I would have just pulled the card. Now, if it's not stated, now they feel like if it's not stated that they could pull the card, and we have to have it in there that they can pull the card, then that's what we have to
It's
do.
crazy. Again, though, in my business experience, not only could they cancel or stop it, they also set limits in certain categories, right? So I couldn't go buy a new car, right? You know, I couldn't spend but a certain amount of money on retail style items, right? You know, so certain things can have limits.
oh yeah, it depends on your credit card processor.
That's, yeah.
They each had credit card limits. I guess that was recently upped to, and not all the members knew that there was an increase. All the credit card users didn't realize that they even had an increase. Again, stuff I've learned through just watching, so I can't.
Interesting.
Yeah, I was hoping, because there is a current draft that was conducted by our finance director. Even Councilmember Parsley said she was pretty much happy with the original draft. But again, they voted that the committee had to be developed.
I'd love to see that draft then.
Yeah, I would love to see that draft.
I think, Brad, to your point, you know, that's one of the most important things we need to ask for then, is that where's their current guides and any proposed changes that's already been made? Let us see that, you know, and what could we do to help enforce that, or not enforce it, but
We
strengthen
can,
it.
And I know I kept asking, and then I think I kept talking. Could you give us the list of stuff we've asked for? I'm sorry. And if you have, I apologize, my memory is really bad.
That's okay. So, and I should apologize too, I may have missed something, but I said that you guys would like the finance director to attend the next meeting. So if you have questions, he would be there to answer them. You would also like for me to follow up and get the draft policy that the finance director created, but then also what there currently is. Like current policy.
Current policy is important.
Emily, can you actually have the policy emailed to us instead of having to wait for it for the next following meeting?
Yes, we can have an opportunity to look at it before the meeting.
Yes, I should, yes.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Thank you.
Could we, and I'm going based on what I watched on council, I'd love to know gas reimbursements, what the policy is or the procedure is for gas mileage reimbursements for
that be-
staff, because it should be fairly standard, but
Oh, for staff as opposed to council.
I don't know that, what is any policy? In reality, in my mind, staff and council policies should be pretty much the same.
That's not a bad idea.
I mean,
So
so-
the separate ask you're asking for here is rather than the policy for council, what's the policy for
Yeah,
staff?
it would be the existing, to what Mario's alluded to, you sign a policy, I'd love to see that. And I probably could dig on the website and find it, but I'm being a little, but it was described in one of the city council meetings as onerous to do a mileage reimbursement. So I'd like to kind of see that process if possible. And
Where are they driving to that needs to be reimbursed? It's a serious question. I don't mean for that to be
no,
sarcastic.
I have the same question.
I mean, driving to a conference, driving to.
Okay, so certain things that we're asking them to go to.
The way I'm.
No?
Not necessarily.
I'm going anecdotal here, and
Yeah.
it's back to much like expenses. It should be pretty cut and dry. If I'm, at one point, I think when I served on a committee here, I drove to San Antonio for a conference as part of a board. I could have, in theory, put in for mileage reimbursement. I didn't, but that, in my mind, would have been a reasonable expense. Because I was going on city business, and
Got it. That makes sense.
so that's the only one that can really pop to my mind, is that you're doing city business,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
so,
But I think if a council member decides to go visit a job site just to see the progress of that construction, I think it should be on his fuel cost. We don't want more micromanagement towards staff. Staff is already responsible for that.
well, and is it become a judgment call? How much does it cost to process a mileage reimbursement for $20? Does it cost $10? I know that sounds ridiculous, but I've seen environments where you get to that point. I think Rose probably has too, based on her nodding.
Well, they talk about administrative processing costs, but again,
So
I don't know if that's really the issue with.
no, I know
We'll probably find out that's really not.
it should be minimal. I mean,
Yeah.
at best, but
But yeah, I think a good starting point to be exposed to that draft, instead of having to reinvent the wheel, I think that draft will pretty much detail the whole process. And if we want to even add more to it, what can you charge? What's a business expense as opposed to a personal expense? I think we can tweak it. And
Provide
then-
some examples.
Exactly. Give examples of the charges or the items that are business related.
so I think we have a pretty good list already for what I would consider.
Okay, so is it then such that the pay portion of it was really not even part of the agenda?
I think-
Or is it mainly the expense part that is the agenda?
I
'Cause
think the
It feels to me
pay-
like that's pretty much all,
I think the pay part is also on the agenda, and
but it doesn't seem that it's been getting much of a hot.
Right. Is that I don't know. I thought it was just going over the credit card policy.
That's what I thought we were meeting.
So it was
on,
just the
too.
credit card policy,
I thought
I
it was
got
just
it.
on the credit card.
Yeah, I
policy.
never
I
understood.
thought it was a compensation
Yeah.
question, so
So I
it's
don't know how we got
compensation
different-
hidden underneath,
Must be the person that,
yeah.
talked
It's
to
possible,
each of us.
it's possible it's just how I understood it, so I'm not meaning to put any
Yeah.
responsibility on my
A
nomination.
good discussion, though.
Okay,
I think compensation opens it up to all things.
well,
but-
no, so it seems to me like, and maybe this is again my naivety toward this process, this is my first one
No,
of these,
right.
right? So maybe it's my naivety that I didn't understand the full scope. But it feels to me like what the real thorn that people are trying to eliminate is that the credit card expenses has become another source of income to these people, is what it feels like, or at least that's what's being accused, right? Whether that's accurate or not, I can't make that assessment, because I don't know. Because it seems like this credit card issue is quite a heavy subject.
Yeah, it is. And I think that's why we're here, to set those guidelines.
Got it.
So we can,
Yeah, I only say that because it was wrapped in a compensation package to me, right, or a compensation conversation, so,
I agree with you, yeah.
yeah.
That's my understanding.
Would it be possible to get the city manager to chime in on the direction of council? Or city staff to chime in on the direction of council? Because I have to,
So you were brought in under the understanding of it being a credit card conversation, as you just said.
It's,
I understood that as a component of it.
Again,
and-
it could
and
be
that
that I
it's-
just misunderstood, so I'm
No.
not meaning to.
Trust me, the number of meetings I heard them talk about this versus what their final decision, I could have been sleeping that night. Because it could have been happening at 10 a.m. or 10 p.m. So
Right.
I think if we can maybe get some guidance from city staff on
Right, so
their
having a-
true,
Yes. So having a conversation about whether there should be a pay increase when that's not even the question is not a relevant statement. So, yeah.
But
So
it-
now I understand why we keep dodging around the question that I was trying to separate. Yeah.
Well, and I don't think it's a dodge. I think all things are, back to the question earlier, we can say anything. They kind of choose to take it or not take it. If at least this is my personal feeling, compensation includes that stipend in a given month. So if you want to open that conversation, we can open that
No, I don't want to
conversation.
open it up if that's not what's being asked, right?
So let's get some clarity from city staff on the direction of council.
Because I am actually sensitive, or not sensitive, but I'm good with the idea of that pay. It's so small as it is, to be honest with you. If I'm being honest, I feel like that $1,000 a month is not much. So when it got raised from 500 to 1,000, you're right, it's a 100% increase. But from what, right? It felt so small to me, right? So to increase it to 1,000 wasn't a big deal. And if the conversation is, should we also now go to $1,500 or something of that nature? I'm far more sympathetic to that side than I am to this whole credit card conversation anyways. So I'd far rather leave them separate is the point, yeah, so.
No.
And if we're not being asked about the compensations, well, then why bring it up, right? So,
I think city staff will clarify that just to make sure we don't miss anything.
So if we can get the documentation that we requested, if we can have that emailed to us, I think it would help us to be able to go
Be
through it. And I
prepared, yeah.
actually think if we do meet, we could probably button it up after that, don't you think?
I agree.
I agree, and it would be much easier for me to
Yeah.
know what to recommend if I could see what I was looking at, so.
So does anybody have any more want to talk about?
Other than, when would the next meeting be, I guess? I don't know if we set that here or.
Yeah, we do. We have to
We have to set the next
schedule the
meeting?
next
Okay.
meeting.
Can't be within 72 hours, she said, but otherwise,
I'm out of town till Monday afternoon.
yeah, and I'm out of town until Tuesday. I'm in Dallas until the 9th, so I could do the 10th on anytime after the 10th. I could do before then, but obviously we have a 72, meaning I could do Friday, but obviously we can't because of the 72-hour rule. So I guess technically she said we could do Saturday. So if you guys are up for Saturday one, I could do it. That wouldn't be my preference, but I could.
You mean this Saturday?
yeah.
I'm out till Monday.
Oh, you're out until Monday?
Until,
Okay.
yeah, until Monday afternoon.
Okay.
Wednesday the 10th.
Wednesday the 10th works for me.
That works for me
Okay.
too.
Okay,
Does that
the
go,
same time,
Same time works for me.
Same time, same place.
so.
so knowing that we're in this room, is there any conflicts on this room for
On
that?
a Wednesday,
Let me check the calendar.
I don't know what happens,
know.
I don't know what happens on Wednesdays here, so.
Me neither.
I think P&Z, they have their meetings on the 9th.
Yeah, Tuesday alternates to city
To the
council.
city council, correct.
Wednesday at 6 is good.
Okay, so we'll meet here again, and unless anybody has anything else, I'll move to adjourn our meeting.
I'll second.
All in favor, I guess? Did we say that?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
I'm sorry, who was the second? Okay, thank you, I'm sorry.